and I would like to welcome you today to Baltimore City Public Schools District Level Priority Engagement Session. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues Courtney Desabe and Jessica Wilson, and we will be sharing with you information on the district level priorities as proposed for fiscal year 2022. We all have a call to action, and that's to work collaboratively with our families and stakeholders to ensure that they are equipped with the knowledge, tools, and networks to become stronger partners in the education of our children. Our theory of action is simple. We know that if there is authentic and strategic opportunity for collaboration, and in this case, opportunity for decision making and advocacy with stakeholders that are aligned to our district priorities, we have engagement that is linked to student success. During the session today, we will share a brief video on how the district budget process works. We will also invite questions from you and may have about the process. And we will also welcome your input and feedback on the proposed district priorities in the breakout sessions and via the online survey. I will now turn you over to my colleague, Courtney Desabe, the Special Assistant to the Chief Financial Officer, to lead you through the next segment.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Mark. Actually, I have been looking forward to these sessions. It's one of our main avenues of feedback into the budget process and engagement with our community partners. This group in particular, the most vociferous, the most, in line group in terms of like making sure that they're paying attention to what's going on with the district, making sure that they're asking the right questions, making sure they're challenging everything that's taking place with the budget. So this is the group that I've been looking forward to the most, and usually where we get a lot of really good feedback. But just for those of you who are new to the format, it's very similar to what we've done in prior years. We're going to begin with a discussion or a brief video on how the budget process works. The video, I know you guys who've been with us, last year, seen the video before. We're very happy with it. It's a video that was produced and stars city school students. They did the production for the video. They did the script. We gave them, a few prompts here and there, but they actually did the script for the video as well. So we're very happy with it in the way that it's able to share the message of what the budget process is and what people's involvement is in the process. So we're going to start with that video. After which, we're going to go into a little bit of, feedback in terms of like if there's anything else with regards to the budget process that you want to ask questions about before we get into the priorities, how things work or the timing. I can give you a little bit of that right now in terms of where we are. This wonderful time of year in January is pretty much the most intense time for budget development and preparation. We're finding out what the revenue landscape looks like right now. We're figuring out how those dollars are going to be allocated across schools. We're going through the enrollment projection process with our school leaders and getting ready to set up our budget collaboratives. So there are a lot of different bits and pieces taking place. And the reason why we do this engagement now, despite everything else taking place right now, is because this is the point in time that's crucial for determining what the allocations are in central office and in schools. And as we said a couple years back, we wanted to make sure that we're getting feedback at a point in time when we can actually do something about it, not just in March or April when the budget's finalized and the numbers are already set and everything's already a done deal. A lot of the feedback that you've given us historically has been that at that point in time, which is, it's obvious that, things are already set, the board's already going to be voting on the budget. So what difference does it make, what you say? So we wanted to make sure that what is being taken back as feedback and what we're taking into the survey right now is being done at a point in time where we can still impact what's being put into the final budget. This feedback is going to be used just like as it has in the last 2 years to show you in the final budget presentation that there's an alignment between what you give feedback on and where the dollars are actually allocated. This is taken back to cabinet. They're going to use this actual information and the feedback and results from the surveys in the decision making for the district going forward. So it's very important. Don't understate it. Don't think, it's just a checking of a box. We've shown in the last 2 years budget presentations that, the feedback that we received, the top 5 items are actually built into the budget, and, we're putting, money where our mouth is, so to speak. But that being said, there are caveats to everything. We know we're early in the process. We know that everything won't end up looking the exact same way in May that it is right now. There are a lot of things that can change between now and then. Like I said, we're waiting for revenue information. So as those things fit together, we're going to make sure we keep you up to date and we show you in that final budget presentation how those things tie together. So enough of me talking. I'm going to allow the video to do some of the explaining on the budget process. And after that, I'm going to open it back up if you have any questions on the budget process before we get to the priorities discussion.
Hi, I'm Imani, and I go to Western High School. I'm here to talk about school budgets. Not something you think I'd be interested in, right? But school budgets are about me, and they're about all students and the teachers and parents and everybody who makes school work. So we all know how budgets should work. So how can we make them work for us? The first step is knowing about the money. City school budget is more than $1 billion each year. About 3/4 of that comes from the state of Maryland, and about 1/4 of that comes from Baltimore City. We also get some dollars from the federal government and other sources. The amount we get is based mostly on how many kids go to Baltimore City public schools. The more students, the more dollars. Those dollars come mostly from taxes, that is, your school budget comes from you. So it's important they have a say in how the dollars are spent. So once we know about how much money the whole district should get, the second step is figuring out how much to go to each school. About 70% of the total district budget goes to schools. Most of the rest goes to schools too, but it's managed by the district office for things like electricity, trash removal, buses and MTA passes, school police, athletes, and a lot more. There are also dollars spent on administration that keeps the district running. That big 70% turns into an amount for each school. Every school gets a total amount based on how many students are expected to be at that school next year. There's a formula for figuring out the amount for each of the district's 30 or so charter schools, and another called fair student funding. That's used for schools that aren't chartered. There are extra dollars depending on who the students are, like if they have a disability or are gifted or if they're learning English. This year, the fair student funding formula started giving extra to schools that serve mostly low-income families. That's because these students can need extra support to do as well as kids who go to schools in neighborhoods that are better off and have more resources. The third step is the fun part. Once principals know how much money will be in their budget for the next year, they figure out what to spend it on. This is where I come in. Some money comes off the top to pay for principals, teachers for pre-K, and students learning English, career and technology education teachers, and some staff members who support students with disabilities. City schools call these locked positions because district policy and education law says schools are locked into having these people in schools. There are also additional unlocked dollars for staff members for special education based on individuals' needs of students in the school, and principals have to set aside money for this. But what's left over? This is where your principal needs to hear from you. Your school's budget priority meeting is your chance to tell your principal what's most important to you at school, to help him or her figure out how to spend those remaining dollars. So it's time to speak up. Your principal will also have a meeting to show you the school budget draft and the final submitted budget. So remember, it's your money and it's your school. Help make it work for you.
All right. So again, we're always very proud of that video. It's not easy to summarize an entire budget process and all of the steps that entail and how a community can participate and what it looks like, and into something that is 2 to 3 minutes long and is fairly digestible. But that being said, we are going to take questions. If there are any questions on the budget process in general, just how the budget process works or how feedback works during the budget process, we'll be happy to take those questions. While I wait for questions to come in, I'm just going to remind you on a couple things. This is not the only opportunity or only avenue for feedback on the budget process. We have school level engagements, as you well know, the SFC meetings and school budget collaborative meetings, where you have the opportunity to give feedback on your individual school's budgets before they go into the collaboratives and submit their budget to the district. You also have the opportunity, once they submit their budget, when they come back to you, to say this is what the final budget looked like. So you have the opportunity for input into the school level budgets. This process right here is giving you input into the district level, the central office budget. And as always, we will have, the time between the budget presentation in the spring and the budget vote, where you can give feedback. You can reach out to the board to give them your input on the budget as presented as well. So we are, admittedly very unique in our budget process, or how we do the budget process, as opposed to other districts and other LEAs. There are not a lot of districts that do a weighted funding model that allocate dollars on a per pupil basis. Usually it's just, staff allocation. And then not a lot of those districts that even do a weighted funding model have the dollars follow students the way that we do, based on demographics, based on poverty, based on SWB, based on the different criteria. So, this is something that's been built over the years based on feedback and interaction from our community, something that we refined a couple of years ago and we will continue to do. So, this is an important step, an important part of the process. So I'm going to look to the team, see if there are any questions that we need to take up. I can't see the chat, so if there are, someone just read them out for us.
While we're waiting to see if there's any questions about the process that people would like to submit for us to give an answer to this evening, Courtney, do you want to walk over some of the opportunities for feedback and input that people can provide while we're waiting for questions?
Sure. So with this priority survey, we're also posting and sharing a link, and the link is the actual survey. So in that survey, just to be clear, while we're having the conversations tonight and we're going to, go through it and discuss the priorities as they're listed, where we really gather your feedback and information is in the survey. That's where it counts. So you're going to use the survey link. I think they're being posted on Facebook and in the chat, in the Zoom for those there, so that you have access to the link and the survey. It's also on the district website on the budget page. You're going to click that link, and in there, it's going to give you the list of all the 21, I believe, items, district priority items that are broken down into 4 categories we're going to discuss this evening. And what you're going to do is you're going to select the 5 that are the highest priority to you. Now, we know that everything on that list, or every priority that's listed, are things that our kids in Baltimore City schools deserve, and we would like to give them, if we had the resources to be able to do so. So it's unfair that we're in a position where we have to choose between those things, whereas all of them should be, a given. But that is where we are. So what we're asking is that for everyone to take a look at those priorities and figure out, what impacts me the most, what impacts my family the most, what impacts my community the most. How do I want to see dollars allocated in a way that most benefits what I care about in terms of my students and my scholars' education, and select the 5 things, from that priority list so that we can get your feedback on those items. Again, we take the top 5 after it's all said and done, after we close the listing and we close the survey. And we actively make sure that Cabinet finds a way to build those into the budgets that we're submitting in the spring.
Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions that have been submitted so far, so I think we're going to keep moving through the agenda this evening. But if you do have questions about process for the budget, you can certainly submit them while we're talking through other items, and we'll gather them up for an FAQ that'll be posted on the budget website after the closing of the survey on February 3rd. There's also an opportunity to provide questions, comments, and feedback to the budget@bcps.k12.md.us email if you think of things as we're going through the presentation but didn't get a chance to drop them into the comments or the chat. So my name is Jessica Wilson, and I am the Executive Director of Strategic Resourcing and Financial Management, and I'm going to be walking us through some of the details of the district-wide priority areas for this year. We have organized this to have it be a little bit more of a conversation with our partners. So we have some people live here with us in the Zoom meeting that are going to have an opportunity to weigh in live in real time, as well as everyone that is watching us on via YouTube or Facebook. If you're putting those questions in that comment section, they're going to be relayed to us. So we can also take those as well, or comments as we go through the process this evening. As Courtney has already pointed out very eloquently, this is really something that we look forward to every year, getting an opportunity to hear from all the different stakeholders and partners throughout the city as we're working on developing our budget. And so it's really important that you take the opportunity to weigh in both through the survey and in the session this evening and in any of the other sessions that you might want to participate in. So as we're walking through the priorities this year that the district leadership has put forward, there are 3 guiding questions that we're really using to kind of work through that process. The first one is, how do these priorities impact your school community? How will this improve my students' educational outcomes and experience? And what suggestions would you have for additional priorities to include for consideration? These are obviously not the only questions. These are just the 3 that we're going to focus in on to start. And then hopefully the conversation and the questions that come in will take us in different directions as well as appropriate. We just got a question that is from, and I'm sorry if I pronounced the name wrong, and Antonika Ryan. How do providers find out what services the schools have submitted in their budgets? Is there a streamlined location for organizations that provide services for all schools? What services schools are providing, I think if I'm interpreting this correctly, you're thinking about this in terms of kind of the extracurricular activities and the expanded opportunities that might be happening outside of the normal school day, as like related service providers, ESOL services, and those types of things are based on each individual student need. So that is something where you would participate in your school level meetings, and all of those are posted and available on the website, so you can see when your individual schools are having meetings. And that's an opportunity to both see what your school community is thinking, see what the principal is proposing, and get some information and feedback on, and provide feedback on how they're building that budget and what services and opportunities they're providing for students. So let's go to the next slide. So the first bucket or category of priorities that we're going to be discussing this evening is health and safety. This is a bucket that we see every year, but it has a little bit of a different weight and flavor when we're thinking about how we're responding to the COVID-19 situation that we're all facing. And so while this is not an exhaustive list of things that might be considered health and safety priorities, they are things that we wanted to bring out specifically and have a discussion about with the school community to get feedback and input on. The first one there is school cleanliness. This is something that we've heard in previous surveys. There are concerns about the number of times rooms are disinfected and those types of things. And so this is a priority for the district in the sense that we want to ensure that all schools have the appropriate resources to make sure that they're meeting those standard operating procedures for health and safety. COVID testing and screening. This is something that we are rolling out as we get more information about both what is available through partnerships as well as what is most effective based on CDC guidance and our health experts that we've been in partnership with this whole time through the COVID response. Personal protective equipment. These are your face masks, your face shields, gowns, gloves, other things that might be appropriate for specific situations as you go throughout the school day. Ventilation and air filtration upgrades. So the installation of the upgraded MERV 13 filters, as well as providing standalone air purifiers in rooms that are being utilized for in-person learning. And then mental health supports. We recognize that this has been a difficult time for everyone, students, adults, staff, and really focusing in on how can we as a district prioritize providing the mental health supports that are going to be critical for getting everyone ready to be back in person on a regular basis. So with that overview, we're going to open it up to the first question with the folks that are here live with us in Zoom, as well as take questions from the YouTube and Facebook as well. So if you are here with us in the Zoom chat, the first question is just your overall, like, how do these priorities impact your school community? Questions that you might have about some of those things, ideas and comments you'd like to share, opportunities for us to really have a conversation about what some of these things might mean at that school community level. And if you're watching us live, feel free to drop something into the comments section and we'll respond to that as well, either providing an answer or sharing the comments and feedback.
While we're waiting for folks, again, just want to remind everyone that you're going to want to put your ultimate responses in the survey, but please take this opportunity to express your thoughts, concerns, questions, whatever they are with regards to the priorities as they're listed right now. These are not final. They're still open for discussion, but they're still open for communication, still open for feedback. So take the opportunity to give that feedback, and articulate it, however you feel comfortable, so that we can sort of take that back. So it's not just us, sitting here listening to it. Even if we don't have the answers right now, we're going to be taking all the feedback to cabinet and to district leadership as well, so they can see what questions the community is asking. We'll put together an FAQ on some of the more popular questions, so we can provide you with answers to those questions as well. So, and the other thing, of course, we have a lot going on in the district right now. There are a lot of different topics and different conversations. We've been engaging you on a number of these things, like, school buildings reopening and a number of other items. Just to be clear, the format tonight, or the topic of discussion tonight, is the district priorities for fiscal year 22. While some of these things are related, there are only a certain amount of items, the priority items that, we have the time and content to be able to discuss with you tonight. So try and limit it to that if possible, if it's budget related, if it's related to the priorities that we're listing. So please send in those questions and take the opportunity to get, some questions answered.
And in that vein, just so everyone's aware, taking this opportunity to also just publicize a little bit, there is a family town hall meeting tomorrow night on the reopening plan at 5:30. So if that's something that you're interested in and commenting on, providing feedback and hearing more information about, tomorrow at 5:30 is the format for that. And the staff will be here that will be able to address those concerns as well. So for FY22, one of the things that we didn't have an opportunity to do in FY21 was really build in that response to COVID. Because of the timing of that, we had already built the budget, we had already done all that work, and then really had to respond after the fact. This is an opportunity for us to build that FY22 budget in a way that reflects kind of the priorities now that we know that COVID is out there, and we're going to have to be responsive not only to educational needs, but to some of these health and safety items that you see here on the list. And so that first question that we're really interested in is, like, how do you feel these priorities impact your school community? Are they the right ones? Is there something missing that's in the health and safety bucket? What are some of the things that you want to make sure that you're raising up for city schools to be considering as we're building that budget at the district level for FY22? Because remember, you also have the opportunity to provide input at the school level. And again, you can go to the Baltimore City Public Schools website, type in budget in search, and you're going to see a page there that'll give you the links to the scheduling of individual school level budget discussions as well. We could also start having a conversation about some of the other questions if this one isn't really jarring anyone to provide feedback or input. And the second question is really, how will this improve my students' educational outcomes and experience? Or what suggestions do you have for additional priorities that need to be considered and added to this bucket for health and safety? All right, well, we're going to move on to the next bucket right now. That doesn't mean that the door is closed for providing input on health and safety. If you think of something or want to bring that back up, that's perfectly fine. but we're gonna move on to the next bucket.
Actually, we did have a question pop up just now. So from Kim Wiggins on Facebook, how will the adjustments be made if there's an influx of federal or state money that just addresses COVID accommodations? So it's a very good question. And this is something that, now after a year of COVID, we have a little bit of experience dealing with. So there are a lot of things that we have to consider when we do get an influx of dollars, specifically federal dollars, because there are a lot of requirements, in terms of spending, how they can be spent, when it has to be spent by, the very specific items that can be used. So there are a lot of things that we have to adhere to in terms of reporting. And we also have to think about the allocation or delineation of those dollars between our different types of schools. How those dollars get allocated in terms of our central administration, as well as charter schools and traditional schools. So these are things that we have shown or have gone through the process with CARES Act and ESSER funds. So the process would be very similar. We already have the template in place once we do receive those funds for the distribution of funding and the tracking of funding and outward reporting, which is something that we've been doing not just with the federal entities, but also internally with our board, with our community members, and giving frequent updates in terms of how the dollars are spent, what the balance is, where schools is going to, and so forth. So that is something that we are prepared to deal with in this instance.
Now, would just add to that there are, there's a difference in timing as well. So we're going to plan these FY22 budgets with what we know right now. And as Courtney says, as more information or funds become available, we're going to come back to the table and figure out what that looks like and what's the best strategy to apply those funds across the district with all of the different types of schools and student needs and staff needs that we need to consider. We do have another question that came in that asks, can you share an example of what mental health services look like and who will provide those services? The mental health services throughout the district are provided in a variety of ways. And so I'm not sure that we'll be able to give you a specific school level example, but it's certainly something that we can take back to the team as well and get more information on. But in general, when we're talking about mental health supports, we're thinking about that in terms of some of our partnerships with organizations that do nothing but provide mental health. So we have an expanded mental health program right now that provides clinicians to schools across the district. We also have social workers in every school that would be part of that expanded mental health support planning. There's also just staff members in general in the building that are part of the student wholeness plan. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we get to the blueprint bucket that would be engaged in the planning and responsiveness as part of that overall strategy. Let's go to the next bucket as we continue to see questions.
Jump to the next bucket. I just wanted to, are you moving on?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to just jump in with the health and safety piece. I was fortunate enough today to participate in a school level priority engagement session at one of the elementary schools. I could name it, Johnson Square Elementary. And one of the concerns of the parents there was around school cleanliness and what kind of preparation and training the custodial staff receiving to do all these things that we're talking around school cleanliness here, about efficient and prompt cleaning of rooms, etc. What kind of training were they receiving? That was one of the questions from a parent today at that meeting.
And that's a great question. Whenever you're thinking about how you're responding to something across the district, that training component is going to be critical. And so we do have trainings available for custodial staff. And we can certainly go back to the operations team and get the specifics about the types of training. But one of the training is definitely on updating the cleaning protocols to be in line with the standard operating procedure that has already been rolled out across the district. And we have, a lot of different avenues through which we're communicating to about that issue, whether it's to principals, the custodial staff themselves, There's trainings for the teachers as they're coming back into the buildings that cover some of the very kind of basic things. And so it's not just training the custodians in the building, it's also making sure that all of the adults that are participating and supporting children are aware of kind of the general things that need to be part of that school cleanliness and health and safety response. The next bucket that we're going to go through today when we're thinking about priorities is academic recovery. So this is one where we're talking about it in the context of FY22, but we're also very much aware that it is not a 1 year once and done priority as it relates to ensuring that students get all the supports they need to basically catch up and recover from having had almost a full year now of school virtually and the disruption that just in general the pandemic has caused for all of our lives. So the first one there is the summer recovery programming. We generally have summer school opportunities that across the district. This is really a priority that's looking to expand that and to not only expand the number of students that participate, but also expand the kind of the rationale and the usage of different programming in order to target different students with the types of supports they need to accelerate that recovery. Virtual schooling options for all students. This is something that we're really interested in hearing some feedback as far as next fall when we reopen, where we have to be ready and prepared to respond to everything. So where are we in the thinking as a community around that virtual option for students when we're thinking about next fall? High school, evening school, I think one of the things that is a lesson learned from this is that some of our high school students are benefiting from some of the flexibility that has come out of this situation. And so how can we potentially learn from that and expand on it and build on it to meet those needs? Virtual learning platforms for students. The district, as part of the response, expanded the number of platforms that we had available. And things like, obviously you have Zoom and you have Google Classroom and things like that we're using to deliver instruction, but there were also other platforms that were made available, other programming that was made available, and looking at which combination of those things were particularly useful, something that we want to consider as part of our overall academic strategy moving forward, especially as it relates to providing those supports for students for academic recovery. Extended learning options during the school year. So thinking about how we could potentially provide additional time with adults for students to do that work of catching up or accelerating. And the student advising and expanding mentoring, one of the things that we know is that it's critical for students to feel both connected to those adults in the building, but also to understand where they're at and help tailor their educational experience at that high school level. And so this is an opportunity to raise that up, especially as we're thinking about some of our high school students that are struggling with this virtual platform. And finally, algebra access for all. So this is something that we already have a program running in the district, and the virtual nature of the last year or so has really given us an opportunity to think about how can we expand that and really invest in that so that we can make Algebra 1 something that would be available for all middle school students by expanding that program. So those are the basic high level thinking around some of the academic recovery options. And again, the questions that we'd really like to hear some feedback from for any of the folks that are in the Zoom call live, or you're thinking on how these priorities impact your school community. How would any of these improve your students' educational outcomes or experience? And what suggestions might you have for additional priorities to include for the upcoming fiscal year? So again, we're inviting you to jump in and join the conversation to come off mute, or if you would feel more comfortable, you can also put a question in the chat.
Yeah, I was about to say we have one that came in while you were going through that list on academic recovery, and it is sort of in that vein. So it's a question on alternative option programs. So this is from Alexandra Warwick Adams. Are alternative program budgets developed in the same manner as traditional school communities? If different, can you please explain that process? So the alternative option programs actually are not funded like traditional schools, who are on a regular per pupil basis. Something we identified a while back, of course, was that the population in the AOP programs, the alternative option programs, is fairly transient, meaning that they could be in a regular high school at the start of the year, when enrollment or projections are done. And, at some point in the middle of the year or later on in the year, because of whatever circumstances, that's when they get transferred to an AOP program, or they can go into an AOP program for some credit recovery and come back out. So there could be a number of scenarios in which students kind of move in and out of AOP programs. So it's very difficult to fund them on a per pupil basis when they can fluctuate so much. So we fund AOPs in their own separate funding bucket. They have an allocation that's not influenced by the Fair Student Funding or by the dollar allocation per pupil that is shared between all of the AOP programs. About 4 years ago, we actually increased that amount from discussion and working with the AOP principals and ILEDs and so forth. There was a deep look into how AOP dollars are spent, the programs that are being invested in and re-engaged with and so forth. And we did increase the amount that's in the overall AOP bucket by $3 million, so that it went from about $12 million to $15 million. That's split between the various AOP programs. So to answer your question, it is funded. AOPs are funded differently, and for a very good reason. We also want their funding to remain consistent regardless of, whatever other fluctuations are taking place on a per pupil basis, that the AOP funding remain consistent from year to year.
Thank you, Courtney. We also had a question come in from Keisha Goodwin. She asked, the district is slated to gain over $197 million in federal funds and more special education funds. So why are traditional schools losing special education funds and having a reduction in baseline per pupil?
I think I understand the question, but we have not done or released any calculations for what the per pupils look like yet for FY20. I think the information that you're referring to here is a year old. It was what we looked at enrollment adjustments and all, in FY21. So the dollars that you're talking about, first of all, they're federal, so it's not part of the Fair Student Funding. If they're federal dollars, there are different reporting requirements, and those dollars can be allocated differently depending on what the criteria is for those dollars. So Fair Student Funding, once we do have the allocations, which should be within the next few weeks when schools receive those allocations, of course, we'll be happy to share. But they should not be impacted directly by the federal allocation. They're impacted by our general fund allocation. So the revenue that we receive from the state and from the city, so from the governor's budget and the local budget, City of Baltimore, what that sums up to in terms of the general fund is the biggest impact on the base per pupil amounts that you're referring to. But again, that's FY21, those numbers there. We have not released or done the calculations yet for FY22 per pupil.
There was another question in the chat that we got from YouTube. It's asking, how is the school budget, I believe they're saying, going to expand mentoring and career education in the coming year?
That's a great question. And I think that one of the things that we want to make sure everyone understands is that the priorities that we have here would be something that we'd be doing district-wide centrally, as in we're planning and going through that process and making that a priority in kind of the district-wide budget. School level decisions are made in the meetings like the one that Mark went to earlier today, that could also have priorities of their own. They could be the same priorities as these, or they could be different based on that community need. And so how would an individual school expand some of the mentoring and career education opportunities? I think that would look different based on their grade band, but it would also depend on what they are already offering. So we do have partners that do mentoring programs that would be something that'd be available for schools to consider to fold into their programming. And in the career and technology realm, they would want to work closely with our CTE office on what options are actually out there, because there is other programming that they could potentially use to support or supplement what's already going on in the school. Great question from Kim Wiggins that came in. Can part of the recovery plan be to completely look at the way we educate in the city differently? Year-round schools with breaks, school consolidation. It is a hard one, but there are other things we should be looking at too. I think one of the great things about the situation we find ourselves in is that we have learned a lot about how this virtual platform does and does not work. We've also thought about what opportunities there may be to do this kind of big picture thinking. And this is a great opportunity for everyone in the community to provide some of this thinking. So if there's year-round schooling is something that we're definitely going to take back as something that we should be looking at and considering as part of the conversation. The school consolidations, I'm not exactly sure what that part of it meant, but we do have a portfolio process every year that allows us to look at a wide variety of factors across the district and make some decisions about what that could potentially mean for school consolidations or school openings, depending on the situation. So that's a great point, that there may be an opportunity here to think bigger about some items, and that's exactly what we're here tonight to do, is to hear what some of those items are that the community might be interested in us pursuing. So we're going to move on to the next priority bucket. If you have other things about academic recovery, again, you can put them in the comments section or in the chat, or participate in the conversation here in the Zoom meeting with us. And definitely, if there are other things you want to make sure that we are aware, or we want us to be thinking about, that budget email address, as well as completing the survey, is a great way to provide feedback. So the next bucket is the blueprint. So this is an initiative that's been going on in the district for quite some time now. We have intensive learning sites for literacy and student wholeness. And this is really focusing in on 3 key areas that we wanted to raise up as potential priorities for the FY22 budget. The first is Opportunity Culture Leadership Development Initiative. This fits into the leadership bucket for Blueprint, and it is an opportunity to expand and build on some of the work that's already going on in the district that allows teachers to take on different roles and responsibilities within a school, and really provide them the opportunity to keep doing instruction, but also take on some leadership roles as well. Again, supports for social, emotional health and safety. This one you see here because it fits not only just in health and safety, but also as part of our Student Wholeness Blueprint initiative. And finally, as part of the high quality curriculum component of the blueprint, we're looking at new high school English curriculum, providing a complete new curriculum for all of our high school students. This is something that we haven't done in a long time here in city schools, and so we wanted to raise that up as part of that blueprint initiative. In our focus on literacy. So again, the questions, just the guiding questions, that you certainly can ask different questions or have different thoughts or comments. How do these priorities impact your school community? How will this improve my students' educational outcomes and experience? Or what suggestions would you have for additional priorities to include for consideration? We have one last bucket this evening. Again, if you have additional comments or questions on Blueprint, please feel free to drop them in the comments or the chat. But that is operational investments. There's several items and areas that we're looking at to just think about how we can improve overall in city schools. So that first one is teacher recruitment. We know that's going to be critical. It's always critical. And it's going to be interesting this year to be doing that in kind of this hybrid space in which we're in. So having a focus specifically on getting the best talent we can here at city schools in order to provide instruction for our students. Improve translation and interpretation services. This is one of the things that's really kind of a lesson learned from the current situation. And we need to think through how we can better serve our families that have English, either English as a second language, or they are non-native English speakers. So the third one is career and technology strategic planning. This is one that's had a whole public engagement process of its own, and this is really raising that up here as an opportunity to continue that work. The fourth one is youth voice and leadership opportunities and support. So one of the things we want to make sure we're doing is listening directly to students. They have a lot of rich information to provide when we're thinking about decision making, and this would be a strategic initiative specifically around trying to support those students in gaining those leadership skills necessary to really be effective in advocating for themselves, both as students and later on in life. Enrollment choice and transfer process improvements. So this is one of those things where there has also been an engagement process outside of the budget process on this, and so that the ECT office has been working on this for quite some time. This is thinking through improvements that we can make in both how families and students interact with the enrollment office, how that choice process plays out for all of our students in those targeted grades that are moving from 5th to 6th grade or 8th grade to high school, and also looking at how transfers happen throughout the course of the year and how we can improve on those processes. Finally, expanded transportation service capacity. Right now, city schools relies heavily on contractors for our busing fleet. We have a few buses that we own. This is an opportunity to potentially expand the buses that we own to gain more control over some of providing some of those services to better serve our students across the district. So it looks like we've had a couple of questions come in while I was talking. So Courtney, if you want.
We had one from Facebook, again from Ms. Kim Wiggins, who's asking some great questions this evening. She would like to know, what information do we have on the first blueprint pilots and how they worked?
So that's a great question. And I know that there is an evaluation that has been completed, but I don't have that information with me here this evening. So that's something we're going to have to get back to you on, just because we don't have it with us here this evening, but it is something that the district has looked at. So we have that information. I just don't have it with me tonight.
Okay, and the other question is from YouTube by Julia de Busolo. I hope I didn't destroy the name. If the General Assembly overrides the governor's veto and passes blueprint for Maryland's future, how will these dollars impact the district's budget?
So it's a great question. It's certainly something that's happening right now as the General Assembly is in session, and the governor actually released his budget today. If an override were to occur of the Kerwin legislation, it wouldn't impact FY22 because of the rules around how the General Assembly works. It would actually impact FY23. So how that impacts the district's budget would actually be for next year's budget cycle. And it would be dependent on a couple of things. One is that there would have to be companion legislation passed along with the veto override to update some of the information in the bill, like years things start and all those kinds of things. So the phase in of the funding would either be, I would imagine, they would just shift everything out a year. So we would get the amount that they said in FY23 that they originally said in FY22, or they would come up with some other different scheme. So it's hard to answer exactly how it would impact the dollars in the district's budget without knowing like what that companion bill would look like. All of the information around Kerwin would suggest that there would be an increase in general fund dollars available to the district if the Kerwin legislation veto is overridden by the General Assembly this year. So again, an opportunity to ask comments or ask questions or provide comments on any of the buckets that we've gone over this evening, either if you're in the Zoom call with us or online, dropping it into the comments section, and we'll certainly answer what we can here live tonight. While we're waiting for additional questions or comments to come in, we just want to make sure that everyone's aware of the feedback opportunities. So we're working on the FY22 budget, and what's really important is that we get your feedback on that survey, because we use that survey information as part of how we present the budget, both to leadership and then to the board as well. So we really want you to select the top 5 priorities that we presented this evening that you think are the most important. And the district level priorities form is available on the website, and we're also going to drop it into the comments section in all of the different formats that we're broadcasting on this evening. It's really important that you complete that survey by February 3rd, and please feel free to share it with friends and colleagues so that they can also review some of the priorities we presented tonight and provide some feedback. There is also the opportunity to provide comments, suggestions, or ask questions to that budget at bcps.k12.md.us email address. And those will be compiled and used either for the FAQ if they're questions, or the comments and suggestions will be provided to district leadership as we go through the process of developing the budget. Are there any other questions?
I was going to give my last plug. Do the survey. Go to the link. Do the survey. Make sure you're selecting your top 5. You're putting them in the survey. Go to your SFC meetings. You know, your school community engagement meetings. Make sure you're giving your feedback. Make sure you're having your voice heard. Take these chances. You know, take these opportunities for feedback. Take these opportunities for input. Even if not tonight, you know, think about it. Go over it. Discuss it with your family. Discuss it with your community members, with other parents. You know, whatever, however you want to, you know, digest it and use it. Think of questions. Think of ways that you want to see data or information. Ask us. You know, that's why we're here. You know, part of the process. And again, what makes our process unique from any other jurisdiction is this level of community engagement and interaction. You know, we depend on it. We depend on this feedback. It has to be a part of the process. Otherwise, it's not a community budget. It's not a community school budget. So you have to give input on these processes, input on these priorities, and take advantage of it. Please do.
And I just wanted to piggyback on that as well. We are also providing opportunities for our multilingual families to participate in this discussion. We are having a session on Monday, January 25th, for multilingual families. We'll have 5 languages, Spanish, French, Arabic, Swahili, and Tigrinya. Will be the languages that session will be held in. So if you are a family belonging to that particular group or speaking that as your home language, please feel free to join us on Monday evening for that session. Additionally, we are having a session tomorrow for the youth. We are specifically targeting our students and young people to get their voice and input and feedback on these priorities as well. So that session will be taking place tomorrow on January 21st. So join us. Lots of opportunity for you to share your input and give your feedback.
While we're waiting.
Yeah, I wanted to invite any members who are actually in the Zoom chat here with us today. I could call you out by name, Mr. Dana Neal or Miss Dana Neal, Mr. Samuel Burris, Tamara Wilson, Sheila Drummond. Do you all have anything that you all wanted to share with us? Please feel free to unmute your mics and you know, contribute to this conversation this evening on things that you had seen and been informed about. We may be having some technical issues, or don't all rush at once, as we say, you know.
This is Dana Neal.
Hi, Dana. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Thank you for having me. Just 2 things that really, I guess, caught my interest to discuss, and that was one, the academic recovery. I'm glad that some emphasis is being put on that, because I do believe that, unfortunately, because of what our children have experienced in FY20, that they are going to need that academic recovery. And I was listening to you all talking about perhaps the year-wide schooling. And my thoughts on that is just that if that's something that's going to be done, that it should be done quickly, because while our kids are missing school, it might be more welcomed than to try to do that, I think sooner than later. So something like the school year 2022, maybe 2021, 22, depending on when you all decide to go back to school, that would be a good idea, because that can be taxing as well to have year-wide schooling. But because our children are really missing school at this time, it may be a good time to seize that moment, that opportunity, to have them engage in a school-wide learning. The second thing is when it talks about, when you all were speaking on cleanliness, the classrooms being clean, I was wondering, would that be something that's done throughout the school day? Not just something that's done at the end of the school. Normally, the custodial workers come in at the end of the school day, they clean up. But will this be something that will be done periodically, perhaps after every change of class, And then also, what do we do about our students who may have allergies to some of the solvents that are being used to clean the classroom? Thank you.
So I want to thank you for sharing the year-round schooling. I think it's something that we're certainly interested in providing expanded summer programming this year as a start for that. And the school, you're right that the switch would take a lot of work and a lot of planning and thoughtfulness to get there. But it is something that it seems like there is interest in, and that we'll take that back to the leadership and the teams that are working on FY22, but also just thinking about to the question we had earlier, like what is the big blue sky kind of things that we could be thinking about right now as far as adjusting education in the city. The school cleanliness question, I would say there's the health and safety guide provides a lot of information about what it is that we're asking schools and all of our custodial staff to do as it relates to cleaning. And it is something that is included in there about cleaning the classrooms on a more regular basis during the day when students have left to be in different areas of the building. So that is something that we're considering and is actually included in the current health and safety plan. So the increased, obviously, like the increased emphasis on school cleaning is also something that needs to be thought about from a resource standpoint. And that's why it's included here in the FY22 budget. Your question about the different kinds of solvents and things that we use in the district, we actually have all green products, and they are hypoallergenic. And that's something that from the district perspective, if people aren't bringing stuff in, the stuff that's in the building there actually already meets a lot of the standards for that hypoallergenic concern. I would say, as someone who has very severe allergies myself, I know what that can be like when people are using things that smell very good to them, but that can actually impact how you feel. And so you are right to raise that up as a real concern. And it's something that everyone needs to be thinking about and considering as we're going through this time, both with, it's everything from, the sanitizing wipes to even some of the scented hand sanitizers and things like that that are out there now. They smell really great to others, but we do need to think about what the impact is on everyone in the community, in the building, as it relates to some of those allergy issues.
We also had some other questions from two other members in the chat. Tamara Wilson asked if there is a component that addresses cultural competency in any of the buckets.
Cultural competency is not called out in any of the buckets right now. So that's definitely something that we can add to the list of things that we should suggest consideration and either including in some of the priorities that you've seen tonight or as a separate priority on its own. So that's a great example of answering that last question. What suggestions would you have for additional priorities to consider?
Right. And Mr. Samuel Boris asked, is there an opportunity to increase budget funding for CTE programs? And also, have there been any consideration to expand CTE programs to middle schools?
So I think the question really goes to the heart of what we're trying to do right now, which is figure out what are those priorities for the FY22 budget. So the opportunity to increase the budget is in one area is always prioritizing that and thinking through what are some of the other things that maybe don't get as much attention or resources in order to raise that up. So I think what I'm hearing from this question is that the CTE strategic planning piece of it is something that really spoke to you and is something that you would want to be marking down as one of those 5 priorities. The specifics about expanding CTE programming in the middle school is something that we'd have to take back to the team to see what their thinking is on that.
Okay, and looking at the time, this might be our last question of the evening. It's from YouTube, Julia Di Busolo. She asked, will there be opportunities for partners to engage in academic recovery planning?
That's a great question. I think that part of the start of that engagement is what we're doing right here with providing feedback and input on how we're building the FY22 budget. And you've seen some of the priorities this evening, so it'd be great for you to complete the survey and to provide any comments and feedback that you have as part of this process. Academic recovery is something that isn't just a once and done thing. We know that it's going to be something that happens over several years as we really think about how we're going to meet the needs of all of our students. And so the opportunity to engage the district in the planning, both in the short term and the long term, is going to be there. Right now, that opportunity is to plug in this budget process, and we really have put some of the things that we're thinking about on the table there in that priority bucket, and we'd love to hear your feedback on that. As we go through that planning process, we'll be communicating other opportunities to provide feedback and input at the district level. And again, I just want to plug that academic recovery piece is also something that should be thinking about and considering at the school level. And so you do have the opportunity to provide feedback and your thinking at each individual school that you might be connected to or engaging with in some way.
Okay, and I just want to close off with a comment. It's not a question, it's a comment from YouTube from Miss Alexandra Warwick Adams. She said, thank you, I enjoyed this format, and please consider keeping this as a real option moving forward. And I'm sure we will. Thank you for that comment.
And again, just before we sign off for the evening, remember that survey by February 3rd, and any comments, questions, or suggestions, please send them into the email at budget@bcps.k12.md.us. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and it's been a pleasure to answer your questions and provide some context for our thinking around the FY22 budget. And please reach out, provide us your best thoughts, because we're showing you kind of our cards of what we think our best thinking is right now. And there are 2 other opportunities. One is that multilingual session that Mark talked about earlier. There's also going to be a youth voice session later next week. And if you are interested in the second semester in-person learning town hall, remember that's tomorrow at 5:30, and it's on our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube feeds as well. So I want to thank everyone for this evening and have a great night.
Thank you. I wanted to thank all those who joined us in the chat, who registered to participate in the discussion and conversation. I wanted to thank you all for joining us and spending this time with us this evening. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.